then give folks another minute or two to come in from this nice day and log into the meeting. So we'll start in about 2 minutes.
Not many people there.
It's hard to compete with that weather out there, David. So people will,
I do get to enjoy it. I've been enjoying it.
Yep. So we will go ahead and get started. We are reconvening. We started with an open session for public comment regarding the closed session agenda item of the annual evaluation of our city manager. No comments were provided, so we went into closed session. As a council, we discussed the city manager's contract, and you will see said contract at our July meeting. And so the details of which can be seen then. At this point, we are open for our meeting, so we will jump into approval of the agenda as our first order of business. So tonight we have 5 items to be discussed. Do we have any comments from the council regarding tonight's discussion action agenda items? Or, I'm sorry, the agenda as a whole. I know at one point we need to pull one of the consent agenda items. I'd like to do that now. And we've been asked to pull number 5 from the consent agenda, the Ocean Protection Council grant agreement, and bring it out to discussion. I'd like to recommend that we move that to the first item. It won't take long, but we do need to bring it out to the public for a substantive change to the agreement.
Are you looking for a motion?
I'm just looking for feedback. Anyone else have any comments on the agenda? If not, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda with moving consent item number 5 to number 1 to the discussion section.
And I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda after moving consent agenda number 5 to number 1 on discussion.
Eli, do you have a?
I just wanted to note that also consent agenda item 4, the CAL FIRE Water Service Agreement, in your packet, it just said Exhibit A. So we have attached Exhibit A and would like to just bring that, actually pull that item too, just to say that we're incorporating the 1-page resolution as Exhibit A, which would basically authorize me to carry it out, the agreement. So yeah, if we could do 4 and 5, just so we can have closure on that, since it was not complete in the packet.
That works for me. I will amend my motion to pull 4 and 5 from consent and cover them number 1 and 2 in the discussion. Do we have a second?
Second as amended, approve as amended.
Gabe, I do know that our attorney asked us to do roll call votes. So can we have a vote on approval of the agenda?
Yes, we'll start with a motion, Grover, seconded by Davies, to approve the amended consent. To approve the amended agenda, starting with Council Member Davies.
Aye.
Grover,
Aye.
the West is absent, Ladwig,
Aye.
and Clumpus.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you very much. We have, our minutes will be available at the second meeting of the month from our May 11th meeting, so we don't have any minutes to approve. So at this point, I'm working two computers here, so give me a minute. It looks like our next item for this evening is council reports and committee assignments. We'll start on my screen. I'll go clockwise, starting with Mr. Clumpus.
And actually, I was going to ask Steve to do the pledge.
Oh,
Yeah, we never did pledge, but
yes, sorry about that. That one snuck past me. So please stand and point in the appropriate direction. All right, thank you for reminding me, Eli. All right, now back to council reports from Mr. Clumpus. You're on mute, Mr. Clumpus.
Sorry about that. I'm gonna see
No
if I can
worries.
share my screen. Let's do that. Let's see if that works. Can you see it? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me see if I can make it full. How about now? Can you see it?
Clear as a bell.
Perfect. Okay. In the Gaming Benefits Committee, no changes, no scheduled meetings for the committee due to that's essentially been inactive since 2011. The California Coastal National Monument Gateway Committee, we did have a meeting on May 18th, but there were not a lot of partners attending it. I guess I should say stakeholders attending it. So that part of reviewing the strategic plan will be rescheduled. However, I do want to mention that there will be planning taking place for the 150th anniversary for the Trinidad Head Lighthouse. That's the actual lighthouse that has been working for 150 years on the side of the head. That projected celebration is December the 4th, which is the first Saturday in December. So there's a lot of work that has to be done between now and then. My representation on this committee is really to help organize and make sure we have proper security from the city. And as more information develops, I'll bring it back to the council and we'll talk about that further. The Humboldt County Visitors Bureau continues to support Trinidad by providing free website hosting for events that take place and for organizations that have interest in Trinidad. Finally, the fourth item is the Trinidad Advisory Water Committee. This first committee meeting will take place hopefully next week. It will be a public Zoom meeting. It will be announced in advance. The members of the committee are myself and Dave Grover as city council members, Cheryl Kelly as the chair of the Planning Commission, Bryce Kenny and Dwight Miller as water customers. So that will take place as our first Trinidad Advisory Water Committee meeting. Again, it could be potentially next week. The city's ad hoc water committee that was authorized by the city's current code, chapter 1308, consists of two council members, Jack West and myself, and Eli as an unofficial member. We have been working in the past to help create a communications plan for the drought that occurred last year. And we should be replacing this ad hoc committee with a new water shortage response team that requires the passing of the proposed Trinidad water shortage ordinance. According to my discussions with the city planner, you can't set up the water shortage response team until you also put the Trinidad water shortage ordinance approval and into place. So that's the information I have on that. I know we're going to be discussing it later on, and hopefully we'll have some more feedback at that time. The city manager is also working with Pacific Watershed to review real-time flow measurements from the creek, Liffenholtz Creek. I was able to get measurements today, and I want to kind of share that with you. I've got a bigger one here. If I can do that. There we go. So what we have on the right side is really what we had last year from June to November. And we ran into problems really toward the end of September, October. It went low enough that the city had to communicate with the Department of Fish and Wildlife in California because of the low flow. If we look at where we are this year, the first reading that we got was in May 7th. That was at 2 cubic feet per second. That's a matter of volume of flow down the creek. And I got a measurement today of 1.678 cubic feet per second, June 8th. So if we look at last year's flow, this is where we were in July last year. So we're actually much worse off than what we were last year at this time of the year. My hope is that the flow measurement system will be updated so that we can get weekly measurements, because as we get closer to July, we may have some water shortage issues that we need to address as a city to communicate to our residents. So I'm hoping the flow meter will be at that point fixed and ready to go. Finally, I want to share just the last page of my report, which I'll submit to Gabe, so we'll have it as the record. If you look at drought conditions today on drought.gov, Humboldt County is in severe 100% moderate drought and 76% severe drought. That circle is where we're located up here in Trinidad. And then finally, if we look at the water supply in Humboldt County, which is stream flow, we're low. there's the sticker closest to where we are by the head, and that watershed area is low. So we have some potential issues that will be occurring in our area. And I just want to make sure the public is aware of it so that when certain restrictions or recommendations come out later this summer, no one is surprised. I think the drought is probably in the news every week now, and it's affecting farmers and a lot of other individuals and businesses. So I just want to make sure that that the city council and that the residents are aware of this particular issue. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Questions or comments for Richard?
Thanks, Richard. That was it's never ceases to amaze me the effort you put into these reports, because and I totally agree with changing to a weekly standard as time moves on to keep everybody aware of what the flow situation is and the adjustments that we have to make. I think that should work out really well. So thanks again for doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll just remember we have this discussion on our agenda, so we can really, this is a nice preamble to that, Richard. So David, you have the floor.
Okay. I was able to attend the RCA Redwood Coast Energy Authority Board of Directors meetings and the subcommittee for the offshore wind. I'm getting more involved in that. There's been an $11 million that's going to be given from the state for the infrastructure. So the things, my dream of offshore wind seems to be coming to fruition quicker than I thought too. So I'm really feeling really good about being part of this. So that was it. I was glad too. It was nice for Memorial Day to see everyone down there. I want to thank the mayor for his part, ringing the bell and all that. That was good though. It was really nice to not wear a mask. So that's all I have to report this time. They'll be more in tune. Oh, I did want to, just as a matter of disclosure, I am representing the Green Party as a delegate for Humboldt State, for the Humboldt State, or not Humboldt State, for the Humboldt County Green Party. So I will be attending the General Assembly the 21st and 22nd of this month, and I should have some useful information from that if anybody's interested. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Davies.
And your report. Thank you.
All right. I attended the Humboldt Transit Authority, and our board meeting this month was primarily to pass our budget and to give updates on quite a bit of COVID and grant money that is coming out for transit nationwide in general, and Humboldt County in particular, to revitalize transit, public transportation. Coming out of COVID, that industry was hit particularly hard. And I am happy to report that the buses now are, should you choose to ride public transportation, know that the buses are fitted with some pretty sophisticated air quality, air purification hardware, ultraviolet and significant air cleaning to make the buses as safe as possible. So they really do a fantastic job of keeping our public transportation vibrant and safe. And that's the only update I have from the Transfer Authority. There will be a meeting tomorrow for the county-wide traffic safety effort that I'm part of. So hopefully I'll be able to give an update for that at our June meeting. So that's all I have. And at this point, we move on to staff reports. Mr. Naffa.
Yeah, we have Lieutenant Miller from the Sheriff's Office, and I'll turn it over to him first.
Good evening, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. So I'm just going to go over our May statistics for the Sheriff's Office. Again, this will be for the general Trinidad area and not all of this occurred in the city limits. So we're talking about parts of Patrick's Point Drive, parts of Scenic, and parts of West Haven. We had a total of 207 calls for service in the area. We took 15 reports that resulted in 1 arrest. 9 of those reports were for felonies and 16 were for misdemeanor violations. We had 1 assault, 1 domestic violence. Sorry, I'm trying to read this off my phone. It's really small. I didn't print it out this time. Yeah, let's see here. 9 vehicle or residential burglaries. 4 thefts. 2 disturbances. I'm sorry, 11 disturbances. 1 trespassing call. 2 alarm calls. 17 patrol checks. 1 pedestrian check. 10 suspicious persons or vehicle checks. 9 unwanted subject or illegal camp checks, and 1 shots fired or heard or possibly fireworks call, and then 9 traffic stops and 129 miscellaneous calls for service. And again, a miscellaneous call for service is anything not covered in the above categories that I just talked about. So that's what I have to report out. Generally, it looks like our numbers in some categories are up and some are down. I have shared the statistics report that I'm reading right now with Eli so that it can be incorporated into the minutes tonight and everyone can see what I'm talking about. This is generally the time of year when we start to see an uptick, especially in vehicle break-ins. So again, you know, the Sheriff's Office wants to get the word out there to all, especially to all the beach communities. You know, lock your cars up. Don't leave anything valuable in there. It's just a day and age that unfortunately we live in. It'd be great if we could just trust in everybody, but again, unfortunately we can't. And then also we are still working with the Mad River Rotary in McKinleyville, who has donated graciously some signs to be put up along various locations up and down the coastline. Just kind of extra warning, you know, just a reminder to folks, hey, don't leave anything valuable in your car. This is the time of year when we're seeing cars getting broken into. So I guess one more thing also to mention that's important, be important to you guys would be that our OHV deputy will be starting full-time come July, and that's funded through the state parks OHV program. And his whole entire focus is actually just on patrolling the waterways. So the, you know, anything that touches water basically, but a primary focus for him will be the beach areas. So that's what I have to report out on.
Thank you, Lieutenant Miller. If I could just sort of almost an anecdotal, but just how would you characterize this Memorial Day relative to years past in terms of amount of activity? What are we seeing in the county right now with the beginning of the tourist season?
Really trending right now, looking at our statistics and stuff like that, it's pretty much in par with what I would expect to see about this time of the year. I don't see a huge uptick in basically property crimes or vehicle break-ins or anything like that. I'm seeing kind of what I would expect to see for this time of the year.
Okay.
So again, we're rolling into the nice time of the year, more tourism, more just people out and about, better weather. And so those are kind of the things that we're seeing. As far as Memorial Weekend itself, really nothing stands out to me. There was nothing in the North County area that really just jumped out at me. I was like, oh wow, that happened this weekend. So it was a pretty decent Memorial Weekend. But we all know, we're coming up on July, so 4th of July is coming. That brings a whole nother realm of issues and stuff. So
Okay. Questions or comments for Lieutenant Miller? Go ahead, Tom.
I'd like to say I appreciate, I don't know who's underlining Trinidad calls on the report, but I appreciate being able to give it a quick glance and see what's happening in the city limits itself. So thank you for whoever is taking that job on.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Lieutenant Miller, and for your service.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Everyone have a good night.
You
Yep.
too.
Thanks, Leanne.
Eli, back to you with the staff report.
Okay. And for Tom's question, Margaret Gunderson out of the McKinleyville office, who does dispatch, is the one who's underlining the Trinidad one. So she's doing a good job with that. Okay, so with the city manager's report, I did have a page included in there, and then I have a couple things to add to it. So the first thing was regarding the downtown connectivity project along Trinity Street and a little bit on Patrick's Point near the Chevron station. So that's moving along. We're actually doing the fine tuning. Stop signs were added today, striping for pedestrian crossings and for some of the parking spots were done today also. A few more things need to be done within this next week, but tentatively the project should be done within a week from today. As far as the stormwater project, it's out to bid. Bids are due June 18th, and the construction window is from July 12th to October 15th. And that will be taking place basically in the starting from Edwards on down towards the harbor and any of those other side streets that are in that area. The Town Hall Solar Project started today and should be done basically within a month. I'm sorry, within a week, but for the most part, it will be done within the next few days, the bulk of it. And then afterwards, we are going to get generators for that, which are on back order, and they're coming from Tesla, so they may take up to 6 months, but will be installed at that point. And we have a new Public Works employee, Mark Gower, who will be beginning on the 18th of June, so in 10 days. As far as the Trinidad Head cell sites, Verizon gave us an update last month and then basically have told me this month that they're still on schedule with the update from last month. The update is that the tower on West Haven, in the West Haven area, will be done by the end of September. The fiber is not expected to arrive until November, and therefore will be installed by the end of November. I've asked them that once it's finalized, that they make sure that our service is equal to or better than what we currently have. So we certainly would like to have the service be at least equal to what we currently have. So any input from residents, as far as service from Verizon in the future would be helpful also. And then the other thing is I do want to thank Supervisor Madrone at today's supervisors meeting. He had brought to the attention to me yesterday, and then I was on the call today on the Zoom call with the supervisors meeting, that Measure Z funding, some additional funds have become available because of the extra sales tax revenue that has been generated statewide. And as a result, although our project, meaning the halftime deputy, was not on the list, we were able to bring that forward and ask that that be funded. Currently, the city is paying for that halftime deputy because it began outside of the regular fiscal year. It began in last fall. So hopefully we'll get that funding. And that's all I have. So I'll entertain any questions or comments.
I would like to add that Eli and I began a discussion yesterday, based on some residents on Underwood who are interested in undergrounding PG&E wires. And really just that we are looking into what capability and what resources are out there to underground wires on Underwood, View, and Wagner. So it's an ongoing project. It's not cheap, but it is something that will add a lot of value to our town to get those wires underground. So just know that that is a process that we're looking into and hoping to kind of fast track as much as possible once we get a little bit more information. So do look for an update on that in the future. Other comments or questions for Eli? All right. Moving on then, at this point, I will read this because I customarily do. We have items from the floor. At this time, members of the public may comment on items not appearing on the agenda. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes or less. Comments should be directed to the council as a whole and not individual council members or staff. Council and staff responses will be minimal for non-agenda items. At this point, do we have any items from the floor?
Good evening, Mayor. This is Katrin Homan. May I please speak?
Yes, please do.
Okay. I wish I wouldn't need to keep correcting false statements about my project brought to you by Supervisor Steve Madrone. In January, the supervisor didn't have his facts right. His explanation at the May meeting was non-factual again. Originally, the supervisor described our project as 18 one-acre parcels with 18 wells and 18 septic systems. When confronted with this erroneous description of the project in May, the supervisor focused his concerns on 18 alleged houses that were substance of a decade-old rumor without factual basis. The supervisor's expertise is in hydrology. We had several hydrologists working on the project, along with numerous experts of multiple diverse land use sectors, as there are many more aspects to land development. If Supervisor Madrone was an expert in these other fields, he would know that this hearsay about the construction of 18 houses on the property was just an unrealistic exaggeration. When the rumor started 1 decade ago that 18 houses could and would be built, engineers and consultants who had studied our site assured us that this many houses would never be able to fit due to the natural constraints and regulatory restrictions. You see why it is important to have accurate data. Without it, science is based on rumors. Misinformation is hurtful and damaging. Public officials are expected to do their homework and not just repeat a bunch of rumors. Supervisor Steve Madrone should become informed or stop speaking about my project as if he knows it. For him, and for the record, my project is 6 parcels, 3 new wells, would have, could have, didn't happen, and water was never an issue according to hydrological studies. This is public information available in county archives, just as the supervisor's false information is in your document library. I find it concerning that Supervisor Madrone's recommended water resilience plan is supported by exaggerated data and inaccurate information. I am concerned that as Trinidad's trusted expert hydrologist, the supervisor's false statements may have influenced others. Can we have faith in Supervisor Madrone's suggested pathway? Could a water line to Trinidad be more appropriate than is currently believed? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Holman. Other items from the floor?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just had one, just wanted to follow up on something I raised at the last meeting and bring it back to the top and see if there's any new information, just requesting that the city reach out to the sheriff's department or whomever it might be to see about speed enforcement in our town, and in particular, getting one of those portable radar signs. And I'd love to see that on the main as well as the collector and feeder streets as well. There's just an ongoing issue. And I think with the season approaching, it'd be nice to kind of have that out there and that awareness raised for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. Eli, do you have a response? I was not at the last meeting, so I'm not.
Yeah, I will, talk about possibly bringing this back. But last year when I brought it forward to the council, the comments that were received in general were that people did not like increased signage in the area, and they started talking about speed humps and other alternative ways versus the portable radar sign. Although I thought a portable radar sign or a radar sign actually just incorporated into our speed limit sign. So right below the speed limit line sign, if it would just read what the current speed is, that hopefully people would slow down. So we can bring that back in the future and see if it's more receptive than in the past, which was last year.
All right, thank you. Other items from the floor at this point? And I'm doing my best to monitor the chat, the hand raising, all the different methods. Looks like there's a couple of phones. So seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. And so at this point, all matters on the consent agenda are considered routine by the city council and are enacted in one motion, no separate discussion. If discussion is requested, we've already done that. We've removed items 4 and 5 from the consent. So at this point, that leaves the staff activity report, financial statements, and law enforcement. Any public comment regarding the consent agenda? All right, seeing none. Do we have a motion regarding the consent agenda?
I'm going to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as amended.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a first from Grover and a second from Clumpus. Gabe, would you mind doing a roll call vote, please?
Yes, we got a first and a second by council members Rover and Columbus to approve the consent agenda as amended. We'll start with council member Grover.
Aye.
Columbus,
Aye.
Ladwig,
Aye.
and Davies.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. All right, let's go with the CAL FIRE for our first discussion item, the CAL FIRE water service agreement. Eli, if you don't mind, just sort of reiterating for everybody why you wanted to pull this from consent.
Okay. The original packet has the agenda item for the CAL FIRE water service agreement. So it does have the agreement. And in addition to that, there's a page that said Exhibit A, and there was nothing attached. Exhibit A is a resolution and has subsequently been added. And it's a resolution of the City of Trinidad authorizing myself as city manager to enter into and execute the agreement, which does appear in the consent agenda, for sale and distribution of water by and between the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, otherwise known as CAL FIRE, and the city of Trinidad. So that one-page resolution authorizing me to enact and sign the agreement is the Exhibit A. So I did want to pull it simply to bring that to everyone's attention, because the original packet just said Exhibit A and did not have the attached resolution, which has subsequently been added.
All right, thank you. Counselors, have you had a chance to review Exhibit A now, the resolution? On page, looks like 35 of 82 in our packet. I just want to make sure everybody's.
I only have 81 pages in my packet. Is there a brand new one that's been posted since 5 o'clock?
I only have 81 as well.
I don't know where I got mine, but I got mine at the same time.
Yeah,
Gabe, can you?
I added, at Eli's request, I added the resolution to the packet. And, you know, I don't know exactly what time it was. I want to say it was around 3:30, 4 o'clock. So you might refresh the browser. It might.
It's there. I just re-downloaded it. It's there.
There you go. Okay.
Page 35, is that what?
That's what I'm seeing, 35 of 82.
Okay, give me a moment. I can look at it.
Okay. Richard, David, do you have that as well? Richard, you were on
I'll
mute.
get it in just a second.
Okay. It's a pretty straightforward resolution, basically authorizing the city manager to enter the agreement that was included in our packet. So that's what we're voting on for this one. But any questions or comments from the council for Eli, and then I'm going to open it up to the public. All right, seeing none. Any public comment on this item to enter an agreement to deliver water to CAL FIRE? All right, seeing none, no chat, no hand raising, bringing it back to the council for a motion.
I'll move to accept the resolution 2021-03 to execute the agreement for sale and distribution of water by and between the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection and the city of Trinidad.
I'll second that.
I see a first with Davies and a second with Klompus. If we can do a roll call vote, please, Gabe.
Yeah, we'll start with Councilmember Grover,
Aye.
Klompus,
Yes.
Davies,
Aye.
and Ladwig.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to our Ocean Protection Council Grant Consultant Agreement. This was a last minute pull from consent to update some language in the agreement. Eli, can you give us a brief summary of the change that is being proposed?
Yes. So the addition is adding the language that would read Churi Management Team to the planning partners. So this appears under section 2.3, community meeting. It's an Exhibit A, and it's the scope of services between the city and Greenway Partners, which is the consultant for this Trinidad Community Coastal Resilience Planning Project. So task 2, community engagement and partnership services, has planning partners, and it adds Churi Management Team to the existing Churi Ancestral Society, Yurok Tribe, Trinidad Rancheria, and City of Trinidad.
And what page are we looking at, just to make sure that I'm seeing? I saw it earlier and now I can't find it, the addition of the management team.
Okay, I'll have to,
If anyone can help me find it.
I'm looking at page 39. I don't know, it doesn't have an addition. It just has Churi Ancestral Society, Yurok Tribe, Rancheria, and City of Trinidad.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at too, and I don't see the addition.
it
of the
hasn't
name.
been added
Red.
yet. We'll
Oh,
be
okay.
adding it.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on here, to approve the agreement amended with the addition of the management team in section 2.3.
Exactly.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we were all discussing and considering the same thing. Any questions or comments then from the council regarding this agreement? Okay, any comments from the general public regarding this agreement? All right, seeing none, bring it back to council for a motion. No motions.
No motion.
Do you want me to make the motion?
I'm not exactly sure how to say it.
Let's see.
Actually, I have a quick question before you, while you're thinking
Sure.
there, Steve.
Sure.
So this is just for the meeting aspect. This is for the planning aspect. This is not for the entire project. Is that what this is? Because I see a very large number, $440,000 or something in one place, and then total grant. And then I just see on page 40 of 82, compensation in total is $56,000. And it's all about meeting and project management. So
I mean, really what we're doing here, and that's actually a really good point, is this was in the consent, but we decided to pull it to make sure that we included the language to include the management team. But really the whole item is up for discussion. We just wanted to make sure that we understood as a council the reason we pulled it from consent. But if there are other questions, by all means, this is a discussion item now, open to that.
Okay.
it looks like
maybe
this is
I-
just grant task 2 was what we're looking at tonight. It's not the entire section. So it's part of the grant. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, that's correct. It's under, which starts on page 38, scope of services, schedule and deliverables. And then it has task 2.1, 2.2, and then on the following page 39, it says task 2.3, community meetings. So under there, the fourth line under community meetings says planning partners. So we're adding the Churi management team to the planning partners, in addition to the Churi Ancestral Society, the Yurok Tribe, the Trinidad Rancheria, and the City of Trinidad.
Yes, I understand that. And so this is only for grant task 2. I'm assuming there's grant task 3, grant task 4 coming up for approval later on. Is that true?
This agreement is the extent of it. There's a task 2.4 project management, but that's the end of it for this Greenway Partners consultants. So that's this agreement is just based upon their role in the process of getting the planning partners together to get input on the coastal resilience plan.
Yes, so later on, we're gonna see task 3 and task 4. That's my question.
Well, when you say later on,
Like in a couple months or a couple years in the process of
yeah.
executing this
Yeah,
project.
I could see your point, but this is dealing with Greenway partners. So the other task may end up being some other parties other than Greenway partners.
Yes, I understand that. So later on, we're gonna be dealing with potentially approving expenditures for task 3 and task 4. This is only for the
Exactly.
Greenway partner part. Okay, thank you.
Exactly, yeah, which actually appear on page 37. So
Yes,
that you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the motion really before us is to amend the Ocean Protection Council grant consultant agreement with Greenway to include the Churai management team in section 2.3, community meetings.
So wait. Right.
That's a motion.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're making the motion?
We also
just made a
need
motion.
to execute though, right? So we're gonna amend and execute. Is that? Did I hear you say execute in your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I'll second that.
Second.
So we have a first and by me and a second by Tom Davies. Gabe, can you give us a roll call vote, please?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we've got a motion, Ladwig, second, Davies. And we'll start with Councilmember Grover,
Aye.
Klompus,
Aye.
Davies,
Aye.
and Ladwig.
Aye.
Motion carries, passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right. Moving on now to what is in our agenda as item number 1, discussion decision regarding returning to live meetings in the town hall. I asked that this be brought forward because we are expecting June 15th. So next week, we're expecting to get some direction from the state regarding public meetings, regarding COVID activities and ongoing safety concerns. And so there has been quite a bit of interest from a variety of folks, myself included, in returning to in-person meetings in a way that is safe and effective. And so in the council packet, we have some considerations. Obviously, we're gonna wait for that official word coming out from the state. And I believe the county is also going to start working on plans for public meetings. But it is suggested that we retain the ability for folks who do not wish to meet in person to still participate through Zoom, broadcast, some sort of mechanism to make sure that people who are not ready and or comfortable meeting in person still have the ability to participate in the public process. And so there will be some details to work out. And really just wanted to bring this discussion and see what both counselors and staff and citizens, residents of Trinidad feel about this. So I'm just going to put it out there to get a sort of a, what is it, a straw poll from the council and see where we're at and things to consider for moving back to in-person. David?
If I could interject, Mayor, logistically, if once we go to in-person meetings, the suggestion is that we have broadcast of the meetings via the YouTube by Access Humboldt, and they could have one camera in the town hall. Of course, we could always do it by some other means, but the intent is if someone wants to participate in the meetings, it would have to be at the town hall because of logistically, it would be, we don't have the resources to have going back and forth between the live meeting, who's present at the live meeting, then to go to whatever is online. So the online would basically be for people that would like to see what's going on. But if someone wants to say something, they should send an email to the city. That would be the public comment, or show up in person. That's the suggestion by staff.
Okay.
So,
And obviously we'll work on the technology and the feasibility of all this as we move forward. David, you were going to say something?
yeah, because I was saying that we have had actually council members call in too, so it is possible to call in. I'm at town hall right now. I get a lot more out of it, just, you know, from my personal experience. I just feel more alert, and I'd like to see the other members here, and I believe we're all vaccinated. I mean, that's obviously a big plus, so about doing that. So that's where I stand right now.
And I also meant to pose a question on, and I know we're going to get guidance on this, but this is something that we don't need to answer now, but at some point we probably do need to establish something about whether or not people who are vaccinated are permitted, or what kind of safety checks we can have to assure that, you know, no one coming in with a temperature or whatever is coming into the space. And so I do not intend to get into that decision tonight, but I do want to pose that as something I think we're all going to have to wrestle with sooner than later. So Mr. Klompus, do you have, I'm just going to kind of go around the room here.
Yeah, I'll defer to both the CDC and the state of their recommendations before I'll make my own assessment. I think the Zoom meetings and the WebEx has actually worked out fairly well. It's allowed people to connect up that may otherwise have not been able to. So I'm supportive of face-to-face meetings, but I'm going to defer to the health experts and allow them to really make a recommendation that we can then evaluate as a council and decide whether to move forward or keep things the same. We're not losing anything primarily by doing it by Zoom. We're still getting work done. We're still governing. We're still making decisions and hopefully bettering people's lives and livelihoods. But I really would prefer to defer to those experts to make the recommendation that we can then accept or continue to go with WebEx or Zoom at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Davies?
Yeah, I'll echo much of what Richard said, and then add that I really would, when we return, regardless of COVID status or not, highly encourage a YouTube version of our meeting so people can watch. But I also want to throw out that it's not that difficult nor impossible to also conduct, like if we're still in the midst of spread of COVID and people want to comment, to conduct a meeting via Zoom at the same time you're conducting a personal meeting. I do this every day. And so there's just a Zoom meeting that's open. The people could call in. They perhaps wouldn't see us unless, they could also see us with just a simple webcam attached to the laptop that's running the Zoom. And then the person, like Gabe, usually gets the sign up sheet or whatever. If he sees people wanting to comment on the Zoom, he can call on them and they could still comment at the same time. So I also see that as a viable alternative for people that are health compromised, and even if they're vaccinated, they don't want to come because it's an indoor area, and there have been issues with people still getting sick. So yeah, if we go back in person, if and when, hopefully when, YouTube and a simple Zoom setup, like we all would not have to be on Zoom as council members. It would just be run by a host, and they could see, and then the comments could be heard through a speaker. So that's my view.
Great. I'm going to switch over now to Eli and Gabe again, just because of your direct involvement. Just all we're looking for is just some early thoughts.
Yeah, I gave some thoughts. I want to see what Gabe may have to say, because he generally would be the one who would be doing it. And we're looking at just the fact that there's a one person there that's controlling and taking minutes and all of that. So Gabe, any comments that you would like to?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, I'm curious. I've thought about this quite a bit over the last few months, and I'm in fact participating, monitoring some of the conversations that are going on in meetings that are happening with Access Humboldt and the clerks around the county. And I mean, after Councilmember Davies' comments, I would love to maybe chat with you a little bit more about how easy it seems, because I think the clerks group is finding it to be somewhat complex, just so that everybody can be heard and your voices, are not confused, and council members being heard to the people online. It is a little technically involved to make that happen seamlessly. And so I'm gathering information as quickly as I can now, but I'd love to hear more, maybe Councilmember Davies, after, we adjourn or something behind the scenes. You can maybe share with me some of the formats that you've participated in where that is pretty seamless. But yeah, I'm still gathering information and open to any suggestions, but I'm following, like I said, Access Humboldt and the clerks group around the county to I think we're all trying to work together to find a format that is successful.
Yeah, Gabe,
I'd be happy
we
to-
too have a meeting space at the university that is basically the town hall, but with a capability to broadcast people's voices and faces across many media. So I can reach out and get some of that tech information for you as well, because it does work. Because the sound is nothing trivial. If you don't have it right, it doesn't work at all. So, but I did see a hand raise. Aaron, I think you had a comment that you wanted to share.
Yeah, just wanted to say, one, I appreciate this discussion. I think it's really important. Obviously, we know we've gone through a paradigm shift in our society here through this last year and a half. I would advocate and request that we try and pursue a hybrid meeting as much as possible. I think one of the things in my short time as part of this community that seems that we struggle with is community engagement involvement. And I'm just curious anecdotally, for you guys just to think about offline, are you seeing more participation now, more people showing up at meetings, and a greater variety perhaps with the Zoom platform and WebEx? Then the other thing, just from a technology standpoint, I'm part of another group, and we're exploring a device called Owl Labs. And their website is just Owl Labs. It literally looks like an owl. It's a speaker system that sits in the middle of the room and has a 360-degree camera and pivots and watches whoever's speaking. So it's kind of a little bit more of a direct interactive. And I want to say the price point is $1,200, $1,500, depending on the model. But just something to throw out there as technology. But please consider a hybrid meeting and continue that forward, even outside of COVID. I just think it gives greater opportunity for engagement.
Thank you very much. And definitely agree that if we don't learn something from this, we've missed an opportunity to use tech to get more people involved. At this point, I want to throw it out there to the participants in the meeting, folks from the community. If you feel like sharing what your thoughts are and maybe considerations that we haven't already mentioned, that this is your time.
Is she talking muted?
Ms. Levine, are you trying to share your thoughts? You were off mute. You need to, there you go.
Okay. My main interest, you probably know, is the water situation. And it's, of course, unclear how we're going to solve the issue at this point. So I've been thinking of ways, things to do as a preliminary to make things easier going forward. There's numerous issues to deal with water improvement, with the system that we have. And then, of course, there's the overriding unknown projections of drought, which,
Paula, I'm asking about in-person versus virtual meetings. So
oh,
do you
sorry,
that's okay. Do you have thoughts on that you wish to share?
no.
Okay. We'll get to you eventually.
Okay.
Other comments from the community regarding in-person meetings, considerations that the city really needs to include? All right. Thank you for your input. And obviously, as this progresses, we'll have more details. Really, this was a litmus test to see where people were at. I personally am very interested in getting back in person, obviously with the virtual capability as well to ensure full involvement. But I believe we can get quite a bit done in person. So thank you very much for that discussion. At this point, we'll move on to item number 2, the continued discussion presentation regarding our fiscal year 2022 budget preparation. I turn this back to Eli and Gabe.
Okay, thank you. I'll get started a little bit and then turn it over to Gabe. So basically, between this meeting and hopefully one more meeting during this month, we could get a budget in place for the 2021-22 fiscal year, since that would begin July 1st. And the sheets were prepared by Gabe. We had discussed them, and he has laid out, generally speaking, the revenues for this past year have increased, partly because of the fact that even the county has increased with revenue from sales tax. So additional sales tax where people have been buying at home rather than driving to malls and driving to downtowns and in other areas. So we've ended up getting quite a bit more revenue this past year. And as a result, the budget was for around 700,000, and the actuals are estimated to be about 842,000. Expenses are running approximately or close to what we had anticipated. And therefore the positive balance is going to be over 100,000 and possibly even greater, up to 166, depending on all the numbers, how they play out. So, so as a result, we also have to take in place during this particular year, we have had additional revenue, which we had received from 3 cell providers, both Sprint and AT&T, in addition to Verizon. So at the moment, and I think it was about a month ago, Verizon cut us the last check that had the other companies included. And since then, now we're just receiving Verizon. So for this upcoming year, we're only going to be receiving Verizon, and then that would probably be sunsetting in the first half of the year, half of the fiscal year. So by December, if everything works out well, in November to the early part of December, then Verizon may be abandoning Trinidad Head, and we'll lose that revenue. In addition to that, the harbor is unknown as far as how the revenue that we receive from there, if it ends up being a fee to trust, that then we would not receive the sales tax and the TOT tax from the harbor. So anyway, those are things to be thinking of for the future, but it does look that at least the estimated actuals have been higher than anticipated. And again, that's hard to tell because in the future, people may be reverting back to more in-person shopping in malls and traveling to larger cities. But for the time being, a lot of online sales have resulted into increased revenue. I'll turn it over to Gabe. He can walk through the different parts of the various portions of our project, of the water fund, the cemetery enterprise fund, and then, of course, the actual expenses. So Gabe?
Thank you, Eli. I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. I'm sharing my screen. And just a quick pulse check on the audio here. Am I doing all right?
Yes, sounds good.
Thank you. Okay, so Eli just touched on probably one of our most important aspects of our budget, which is the revenue. And when I look at the budget for the city, it oftentimes, as I think I've touched on in the past, like it's really good to look at the city, look at several fiscal years at a time, because not always is it just straight black and white, but just like anything else, if you have a savings from one year to the next or a deficit, it helps guide and perhaps even influence some of your decisions going into the next year. As we all know, we're fortunate here as a city to have successfully made it through the sales tax election process last year. And we've also received, and I'd say this, in the COVID year, quite a bit more in sales tax than we anticipated due to likely all of the online shopping. The county, I guess, had the similar experience with the Measure Z funds, and it seems to be across the board. So just to recap, last month we provided a kind of a preliminary evaluation regarding the fiscal year because it helps frame the expectations for the upcoming fiscal year. At that time, we had not received several significant quarterly revenue receipts. Property tax, bed tax, sales tax, those receipts were reported later in May after the May meeting. And it gave me a much clearer picture about how we fared in 2021, or will fare in 2021, I should say. And some of the key takeaways are this, as City Manager Naffa mentioned, sales tax, self-facility rent, and bed tax revenues exceeded our budget expectations this year. And with the exception of a few large projects, the city spent very cautiously due to the uncertainty of the COVID pandemic this past year. And in combination with the underspending and revenue increases, left the city with a second straight year of general fund savings, larger than we anticipated. And along with that, most of our budgeting goals for 2020 were met. There were a few documents in the packet. The April 30th, 2021 financial statements were in the consent agenda. The worksheets for the general fund, the revenues, the administrative fund, budget, the police, fire, public works were also included in your packet. And the COPS grant funding, gas tax, TDA, cemetery, and water are also included, along with these year-end summaries, which is kind of what I've got posted up on the shared screen right now. And I like looking at summaries first because the fine-tuning line items of the budget can sometimes get a little overwhelming or boring, depending on whether you're a numbers person or not. But the worksheets are the actual tools we use to build these summaries, along with some of the expectations and anticipations that we forecast. So some of the goals right now we'll try to touch on is examining the statements through April 30th, review the preliminary budget worksheets, which are in your packet. If you have questions, you can throw them at us, and discuss how the activity from the current year combined with the dedicated reserves impact budgeting for 2020, and talk about some of the themes for this upcoming budget year. So as Eli mentioned, our expectations exceeded, our expectations were exceeded in terms of revenues. And, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we well, besides just general, like for instance, the Verizon rent, we only anticipated that for, I think, 3 or 6 months last year. And of course, it came in through the entire year. Same thing with sales tax. We budgeted conservatively for our revenues, but those numbers came in well exceeded our expectations. We had some higher expenses in staffing, such as our city attorney's bills, for instance. But in the end, we fared quite well. That happened 2 years in a row. So if I scroll down to the next, this is last year's page, and I don't know if you can see my mouse mousing over the positive balance down here relative to what we had budgeted. I think the trend that I see is that we're exceeding our revenues, but we're also, I think, internally, I think we're we've hit a maximum capacity in terms of our production. So when it comes to this year's forecast, I have a couple of themes that I wanted to just sort of share that would maybe give us a chance to try this year to bite off what we can chew as opposed to what we can't chew, which a lot of times we get excited and we try to do a lot and we just can't. Our staff just is not big enough to produce the level of productivity, I believe. And this year we'll be asking for a few more resources to increase the staff relative to the council's desires. But water is a big theme, I think, for this year. And I think we need to focus on water for the first 6 months with the drought, public communication. I think that's going to take a lot of time and energy from staff. And I don't want to undercut our ability to provide that priority to the community. Staffing, of course, comes hand in hand with that. We need some additional staff resources to be able to cover all the bases, especially with new committees being formed, the minutes, the dedication associated with each of those committees, and communications. Now, I made that note as far as how we now have possibly a hybrid meeting. We might need to invest some time and energy in technology and reopening, and also construction recovery. I think those are some of the biggest themes, I think, along with enforcement of our ordinances, are going to be themes for this year's budget. And construction recovery, by that I mean for the next few months, the lower part of town is going to be tore up, and there's going to be a lot of public communication involved in that. So coming up with these grandiose ideas of all these things we can accomplish when the town hall is going to be bogged down with trying to keep the peace amongst the community with all the disruption that's occurring, I think is a good way to start. So going back to where we are faring at the end of this fiscal year, I just kind of made a quick highlight list of how we got to maybe perhaps where we are here. $50,000 we received in COVID relief this year that we didn't really know it was coming, but it was a bonus here. Verizon rent for the entire year. We sealed our roadways with that slurry seal project paid for with gas tax funds. We still have $10,000 set aside for trail maintenance. We still have $10,000 reserved for the Civic Club room update. We haven't done any construction this year. Would have been a great year to do it, but there were a lot of unknowns and we took a cautious approach. This year's budget maintained critical government services. Sales tax revenue was quite a bit higher than expected. Occupancy tax revenue this year was higher than expected. We missed an entire quarter, but we ended up, I think we're expecting to end up kind of right on budget with our expectations for the year. And we budgeted this year without any decreases. We are completing the downtown connectivity project. We're going to be completing the town hall solar installation minus the Tesla battery. And we also received additional halftime deputy from November through June. And those were some major themes of this year that we went after, and we've successfully accomplished that. The water fund, we replaced the temporary main on Van Wyck, and we also replaced those 2 hydrants that were questionably functioning down there near the harbor. So those were some biggies. And I guess I could maybe what we can do is just, I'll scroll back. These are all the budgets that make up our workbook, which ends up producing our final budget. But I'm just gonna kind of go back to some of the basics real quick and explain how this works for anyone that might need a refresher. But this document right here is the general fund revenue sheet. This lists the revenue sources that come in from sales taxes, occupancy taxes, interest income, property taxes, and any other revenue sources that the city receives that is not restricted for any specific thing. So this is a general fund revenue. The general fund is made up of several funds, the administrative budget, which is what you'll see here on the next page. These are the expenses, city managers, city attorney, staff, the consultants, fees, various things from TOT allocations to various groups in the community, local contributions. It also pays some of our overhead operating bills and some of the day-to-day stuff that's maybe a little less exciting than some of our discretionary funds. Along with the general fund admin portion of the budget, there's the police. And the general fund police budget is a little different from the COPS budget in that the general fund police budget is what liability the police force is to the general fund, as opposed to the COPS fund, which is state money that comes to the city to offset police expenses. So whatever the COPS funding does not fund, the general fund pays for it, the tax dollars, so to speak. Then there's the fire department budget, which is very minimal. I think we always budget with higher expectations of expenses, but the fire department, as you can see here, our actuals through April 30th are much smaller. And this is just how our fire chief, he's old school. He likes to budget very conservatively as if everything's going to fall apart. But, they're very good at making that fire department work on a shoestring budget, and they take good care of the equipment, and it lasts quite a long time. And then, of course, there's the Public Works Fund. The Public Works Fund, here's a line item 78,130 trail and park maintenance. This is where you'll find the trail committee's request for $10,000 a year that is there for park and trail maintenance, along with payroll for our public works employees and material supplies and equipment for building repairs and maintenance and vehicle repairs, so on and so forth. Then real quick, here's the COPS fund budget. It looks like this year we're anticipating to receive about $156,000. And the balance I'm showing here at $89,000 is what the general fund, our tax dollars, will be requested to offset, to pay for with, and this is of course including a note I put down here, which is the full-time deputy along with the half-time deputy, and I'm hoping we get the half-time deputy. And then we've got a few other random budgets, the integrated waste management. This one, I talk about merging this into the general fund. It's not as important that it is standalone, but in the waste budget, we do have it set up to record the revenues that show up through our franchise fees that we receive, which is a portion of the revenues that Humboldt Sanitation collects from all of the customers in town. They kick it back to the city, and we use it mainly in wages for the public, a portion of the public works employees' budget to offset their wages to keep the town clean and some, miscellaneous items. And then we're kind of getting into what we call the special revenue funds, and that's gas tax and also the Transportation Development Act, TDA. These funds come in specifically for transportation revenue sources, gas taxes and so on. That money has to be used for streets and transportation related projects. These funds cannot be used to supplement the water fund. They can't be used to pay for uniforms or vehicles per se. They need to be used, put back into the roadways and the infrastructure. So those are special revenue funds. And then, of course, we have what we call two funds called proprietary funds, enterprise funds. Those two funds, water and cemetery, have been set up by the city. Water specifically is legally set up to fund itself or try to fund itself. You don't use water funds to pay for the general fund. You use water funds to pay for water-related activities only, which is why they're separate and sorted out individually. So the water fund, I'll just kind of quickly highlight the water fund because the other funds are pretty self-explanatory. The water fund is one that is, as you can see up here under where it says total revenues, we're expecting around $342,000, same as last year, because we're not raising our rates. We need to raise our rates. We need to do a rate adjustment, and I'm proposing that in line item 71230 down here in the green. I'm proposing a 15,000 or more. Hopefully it won't be more, but budget to allow our engineers to perform the rate adjustment process as required by law, so that we can make sure that our rates are on par with the services that the water department funds. And I'm also including $10,000 in here for drought consulting, because we're going to need our technical expertise this year, specifically in the next 6 months. These are what I wouldn't call them discretionary, but I'm definitely padding those funds because we're going to need those staff members to participate in this process as we look at a low water year, a historic drought year. Down below in these two other last green items, I'm replacing a couple of valves. I'm adding that to our budget. These are real numbers, they're estimates. But as you can see, when you get down to the bottom here, 352,903, if that's where it ends up, we're running a deficit in our water fund, which is why I think it's really important this year that we try to tackle this this rate adjustment process if time allows this fiscal year. And then there's the cemetery fund, which is one of my favorite, believe it or not. I don't know why, but COVID has definitely reminded people of their mortality. And a year and a half ago, when we were talking about potentially adding some cemetery space up there to the Saunders owns some property behind the cemetery. I think the little feedback that I got from a council member or council members was that the cemetery is bad business and there's no reason why we need to expand. This year, as you can see, the revenues are exceeding our budgeted expectations. They did so tremendously the year prior, and I expect them to do the same this upcoming year, which is why later this year we'll be probably proposing a rate adjustment to the cemetery and plots and just making sure we're on par, because I don't think the rates have been raised in almost 20 years. So with that being said, I don't want to make this too boring, but I want to leave a lot of this discussion up to the city council. The one element that's missing, and I intend to have this incorporated into this budget, is the payroll apportionment. Because there's some staffing changes. This past year, we operated with one less public works employee than we had budgeted for. We now have this new hire, as Eli mentioned, Mark Gower, coming on board June 18th. Really excited about that. He's highly qualified in the water department and we need that bad. But we're proposing to be adding to this budget Mark, who is being hired at just a little less than part-time than full-time, which is going to be a savings to the city. As well as another half-time or temporary part-time public works employee, and then possibly another half-time admin staff that can help out the town hall with all of its commitments. And those two employees combined make up basically what one full-time would have cost the city. So there's not going to be a huge change to the bottom lines of the budgets you're looking at in this packet. In terms of staffing, we're just going to have more people on board. and the cost will be a little bit less. So minus that, I hope at the next meeting in June, we'll determine what day that will be. We will be able to wade through this today and hopefully have a budget on tap for later this month that is in its ultimate final form. So with that, I'll just sort of stop talking and entertain any questions and whatever's coming next. Throw it at me.
All right, comments, questions from the council for Gabe and Eli.
Sure.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I just want to thank Gabe for the analysis. I've gone through the budget multiple times. It's easy to get lost and confused, but I do appreciate the review. And it's good to know that there is a cushion or an investment fund that the city has should things become more difficult to fund, that we have some reserves that other small towns do not have. So thank you for the report. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Gabe, if I can just get some clarification, and then David, I saw your hand come up. So
Yeah.
you're saying, because what I didn't see in here was a projection with the new hire, but you're saying that because we were budgeted for 3 public works, we've only had 2. We're in essence returning to 3, even if it was a part-time public works, part-time admin, that overall that you expect in June, we would be able to see that projection come out basically where we're at right now.
Yes, and I'll give you an example of how that works. So I don't have, and I guess I can do this real quick. Let me do this.
And if it's coming in June, that was my big concern, was that we were taking on another employee. I thought it was a replacement and not an addition. So
Right.
really, it's not anything that we're not already set up to handle.
Exactly. So just to give you a quick example of how that looks. This is what we call the payroll apportionment part of the budget. And in it includes each employee salaries, and in the total on the right column over here, this is the total cost at the bottom. This is spread out over
Lots of funds.
all of our funds. I mean, this is a mind scratcher when you dig into this.
Yep.
Public Works General Fund, Police General Fund, Cemetery, Water. Each one of these worksheets has an element under employee wages, and it says see apportionment worksheet for payroll details. So all these numbers combined on all these worksheets correlate to the other to the payroll apportionment. So not necessarily fire, public works. What I was explaining was that these numbers won't change much when it's let's call it 2 part-time employees versus 1 full-time. So you're right, we're replacing, our main public works employee, but we're also going to get another half-time employee out of that. So the overall budget numbers are not going to change tremendously. Adding the admin staff member, that will be the biggest change, but overall, all the funds, minimal compared to, especially after what we pocketed the last couple of years. So the city's going to be in better shape no matter what.
Okay. David, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I pretty much answered my question. I just make a quick comment then. Yeah, I do appreciate it. It looks like the conservative leaning way is paying off, is what I gathered out of some of your statements there.
Exactly.
So I recommend we keep doing that, because we did run into the pandemic that we didn't know. I mean, we had some income coming in, but yeah, thanks for the breakdown. This is, every time you do this, it just makes more and more sense to me, and I appreciate the effort.
Other questions, comments from the council? Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Gabe, especially for the color coding. I appreciate that. Things that are changing perhaps. Couple questions. I think I'm trying to understand what you were saying about the new public works person. And then I thought I heard you say, but the new admin hire will be substantially more. Can you explain that?
Okay, so at this point, you know, if without any new employees, we would have a third full-time public works employee. That employee would be benefited with the city's policies, working 40 hours a week. So there's the loaded cost that ends up being, you know, a bit more than, let's just say, a part-time employee who doesn't qualify for the benefits, for the health benefits and so on. So by not having the loaded cost of one full-time employee, now we're looking at two part-time employees. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That would not make too much of a change at all to the budget. It's about equal, depending on how many hours we're budgeting them. I think one we're budgeting at 30. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eli, is that one of them would be a 28-hour position?
Yeah, 28 to 30
Yeah, and then
for the
the other
public
would be
works.
a reserve position used as needed. Hopefully we believe we have someone in the city, in the community who would be, who has offered to do this and work on an as needed basis, which we would budget at approximately 20 hours. So combined, you've got 48 hours, but they're at their rates aren't necessarily loaded with all the
Yeah.
bells and whistles, so to speak, right?
uh-huh.
So that almost is a wash. But then we're asking to add a halftime administrative staff person with the committees, the water committee, the STR committee. I mean, when Angela was hired a number of 3 years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had a wish list at that time that needed to be filled. Well, just like anything in Trinidad, there's a vacuum and new stuff gets created and these new employees just get filled with new tasks, which kind of took away, it took away from the original intent of that position, which is great. She's a wonderful sort of hybrid employee who's reducing our planning costs, because prior to Angela being here, we didn't have, like, the consultant was billing us at a much higher rate to do what she's able to do for the city on those equal assignments. So, so we're now finding a savings in that department, but we're also finding a void in productivity in terms of implementing a lot of the city council's policies. We're struggling. So that would be an expense, but again, it's only a half-time position. It's not a benefited position. So, at any time it could be unbudgeted, so to speak.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, okay.
And then, so one thing for the council to consider is, for the last couple of years, we've had $10,000 in the trail maintenance fund. And to my knowledge, less than $500 has ever been used out of it. So I would like to see maybe that $10,000 being carried over, added to the next year's $10,000. We have some significant maintenance issues that need to be addressed. $10,000 doesn't go that far. So that would be something I would like to hear from the rest of the council on your ideas on that. And then I also noticed, I'm the one who kind of goes through and just nitpicks certain little things. So I saw that there's $10,000 maybe being pulled out of the reserves for a generator for the city manager's office. And I'm questioning correct me if I'm wrong or give me the reasons, how important that would be if we have a full-on solar array in the city hall and we have backup batteries, in 6 months. We also have a generator at the fire department. It seems like we might have an abundance of power. Maybe just a location change would need to happen during the odd event that we need a generator. So I'm questioning that expense. But I like what you've done with the budget here. It's very easy to look at, and I appreciate the time spent on it. So right now, those are the only things that I had questions about or comments.
Thank you. Eli, do you want to maybe elaborate on the generator, or Councilor
Well-
Davies, are you looking, you probably want a response from us tonight?
Yeah, Yeah, as far as the generator, we have had a generator here, but it failed. And it failed last year, and we haven't replaced it yet. So the intent is to replace the failed generator for this building, which normally would be serving myself and the grants administrator and police when they come in to do their reports. So that was the intent, was to replace the existing generator that had failed. The solar is not going to be connected to this building. It's only connected to the others. And that's why a generator would be helpful here.
Yeah, that's why I just kind of mentioned maybe a location change, but do you have any idea of actual usage? How many times did you really need to use that generator for $10,000 and maintenance?
Yeah, well, anytime that there's that PSPS event, and then we did have like a couple outages in between the PSPS, just sort of like a blurb type thing. Well, one of them was, I think, related more to like an internet outage. But as far as the generator, yeah, I mean, if you add it all up, the intent is just to back up everything whenever the power does go out. PSPS, they tell us it's going to happen more frequently, which I was surprised because they do have the Humboldt plant, and they had initially said that they were going to utilize the Humboldt plant, but so far we have had one major PSPS event this year. And if heat continues this year, we'll be having a number of more PSPS events.
And I think there's a question that needs to be answered too. Are the two generators between here and the fire the same? Because this one is propane for the city manager building. Is it propane or gas for the fire hall?
Propane.
It is. Okay. I just want to make sure that it was the same apples to apples. It's certainly worth considering. Other thoughts, Tom, that you want to share on the budget at this point?
Not now, thanks.
I do have a question for the council to consider as well, and I think this would be something to maybe table until our June meeting, or at least plant the seed. But like the Trails Committee, about having money to do maintenance and or repairs or improvements, I believe that the water. I think we need to set aside money every year for water improvement. And Gabe, I wasn't sure if it was, I'm thinking about the Water Advisory Committee is going to be making recommendations to the city on getting more water out of the creek, efficiency, whatever, but that all costs money. Do we have anything set aside in the current budget for improvements, upgrades to the water system?
Yeah, good question. The water fund, just so that we're all on the same page, has a fairly, I would say healthy. It has a healthy reserve, just over $1 million. So, of course, one catastrophic event could wipe that out. It's let's face it, it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but there is money in there that is to be used for expenses. So at any given time, an employee, Public Works, the water staff, the engineers, the water committee, let's just say, makes a recommendation based on a few meetings and discussions with our technical staff, and says, hey, we would really like to see the city spend some money on this stuff, or on various aspects of resiliency of our existing systems. Well, the first step is going to be to check with our grant writers, right?
Right.
To see if we can get the wheels turning to maintain our reserves, but see what might be in the pipeline in terms of infrastructure. And we all know that apparently this presidential administration at the federal level is really encouraging infrastructure investments, and we're all excited about that. But that might not come down the pipeline for a while. But the reserves that we have are dedicated, for reserves for things that we need. I included some valve replacements in here at the bottom of this, and this is just one example, Mayor Ladwig, that I mentioned, $25,000. That's sort of a rough estimate, but during this downtown connectivity project, we had some issues turning some of the isolation valves so that we could fix leaks when the contractors broke lines. And Ryan was pulling his hair out, trying to figure out how he can do this without having to shut off a third of the town for a water leak where we have valves that should be able to isolate this situation. To him, that was a bigger priority because in the event there's a water leak and you can't shut a valve off to stop the water flow, now you got to worry about your tanks running dry.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are obviously some distribution issues, potential leaks somewhere in the system, but this is just one example of where I just parked some money. And technically it's coming from the reserves. So when you look at the total expenses, it shows the deficit from what we're gaining in revenue, but hopefully we can reconcile that with some, you know, some sophisticated rate studies that hopefully that can be implemented this year, because all these things are considered expenses to the water fund. And I think at this point, if you look at our day-to-day operations, we're spending more than we're receiving in revenue. The last time our rates were really adjusted and looked at closely was in 2012. Things have changed. So you're right on as far as maybe being mindful of recommendations that could come out of this committee, parking some money in an area where it could then be implemented. And I think technical staff is going to really help be advisors in that department. And we can always come back to the city council and ask for permission for a specific estimate amount of money, pull it from reserves and make it happen.
Perfect. That's so you've addressed both concerns. One was the rate and two was the ability to, there's no point in having an advisory committee if we're not going to be able to do anything. So I'm really grateful that we have that money set aside for just that sort of thing. So,
and Mayor, if I can add regarding the water reserves, we currently have put in the temporary water main along Van Wyck, and the intent was to move it to Edward Street. And we did receive a planning grant for that project from USDA for $30,000. We thought we were going to be receiving more funds from them, but in the meantime, they said, you guys have water reserves and that you should be using a good portion of that. So they're proposing basically for like around a $300,000 project. They'd like to see the city, or, you know, they would provide possibly between 45% and 75% grant/loan, and they'd like to see the city use reserves towards the balance. So that's something on the horizon. We're trying to work out the details with USDA and see how that would pan out.
thank you for that update, Eli. I know that we, in essence, we need to rob Peter to pay Paul. We need to spend down the reserve so that we get more grant money, or just get more grant money. So we'll work towards that. Let's go with any more council comments, and then I'm going to move over to the public for some input. All right, seeing I can't see Richard in this view. All right,
Sharing at any time.
No worries.
Okay. Let's go with opening it up to public comment. Any public comment on the discussion that we've had so far, just in how we're allocating money and our proposed budget and the summary that Gabe and Eli have given us. All right, I don't see any hands up. All right, so at this point, I'll bring it back to council. Any closing comments as we look to our June 22nd or whatever we established for the second meeting in June as a date to finalize? anything that you want Gabe and or Eli to investigate? Any questions you need answered before that final meeting? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I brought up at the last meeting, potential revenue things, and Gabe said that, the T-bid 2% had been dropped. So 12 people were used to paying 12% occupancy rate in town. I proposed perhaps raising our TOT 2% since that disappeared, which could be an additional revenue for us if we're billing ourselves as a tourist destination, which I've seen quite a bit, then we might as well reap the benefits of that if we're going to be having that kind of a revenue source. So something else to consider, and then be mindful of the rollover request for trails maintenance.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. I just pulled up the screen, which is our summary sheet, which, I could add more color and bells and whistles to it, but I find this to be probably one of our most useful tools throughout the year, as opposed to looking at all those worksheets. And I think what I'll do is I'll add it to where it says rate adjustments here.
Okay.
On the screen where cemetery plots, that's something I want to touch on. And the other things on this list, we'll add the TOT as well.
Thank
and that
you.
way we'll kind of be reminded of it as we go forward.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks again, Gabe and Eli, for this presentation. Much appreciated. So we'll move on then to our number 3, continue discussion decision to remove COVID signage at trailheads per Trails Committee recommendation. So I'm going to turn this one. I need to get my screen back up. Eli, if you don't mind just giving a summary. I was, again, not at the last meeting, so I can't speak directly to the discussion that was had.
Okay. So in the packet, we're talking about at the Trails Committee had recommended removing COVID-19 signage. At our last council meeting on May 11th, the city council decided to keep the signage until June, at least June 15th, because that's the date that the governor had suggested, and that we would reconsider at our June council meeting whether we would remove the signs by June 15th or at a later date. I do note in the staff report that overall, vaccinations have been increasing, but Humboldt County still has a high per capita count of new COVID infections. And we've had a few deaths recently. And as the summer season comes along, a number of visitors will be coming to town from other areas and may not be aware of the California or even the local suggested protocols. So in that case, the signage might be helpful. So it's up to the council if you wish to end it June 15th, or if you wish to keep it in place and reconsider that in July to see how the COVID situation is panning out in the county.
All right, questions, comments from the council regarding this agenda item. Go ahead, Richard.
Eli, would this include removing the one-way sign at the top of the trail in the head? As you go up the steepest portion, you've got the safety barrier that says one way. So people have to walk around the long way instead of walking up the paved road, like to get to the lighthouse on a Saturday. Is this including removing that barrier that says one way only?
Yes, yeah, this would include that if that's what we so chose. But in essence, we're talking about all the COVID signage, and that one was put up as part of the COVID signage, the one way.
Well, maybe I can just express my feelings about this. I'm hoping that continued vaccinations will get better and that responsible people will wear masks when they feel they need to. But the CDC clearly says that you don't need to wear a mask outside. Even those that aren't vaccinated are not nearly as much a risk outdoors as they would be indoors. So my feeling is at this point, I think they've served a purpose. I'm glad that the city put them up, but I'm not really supportive at this point, going into late June and early July, that we continue to have these signs up. Thank you.
Other comments from the council?
I
David?
generally like to go with the CDC guidelines too, but I would probably go with the popular vote here because I go with the theme that I like to think people are responsible adults, and if they have some kind of immune deficiency, they would wear it too, especially with the idea that being outside is much less dangerous. But I do follow the Humboldt website, and we are having a few problems here, so I just like to hear from other council members and the public at this point.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I'd like to hear if any from the public, but I'll reiterate my desire to take the signs down as at the last meeting.
Okay, let's move it out to the public then. Any public input on the signage, COVID-19 signage on Trinidad's trail system? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. I haven't weighed in. I'm also one to follow the CDC and am in favor of removing the signs at this point. So I think they've served a purpose. I think the community is aware of what's going to happen with their behavior. And at this point, I don't feel like we're going to educate anybody new on the ways to remain safe. So at this point, I think we need a motion. Either remove the signage on the trailheads or keep the signage in place and consider it a later date.
I'll move to remove COVID-related signage, including one-way sign on Trinidad Head as soon as possible, but no later than June 15th.
Okay,
Second that.
we have a first and we have a second. Gabe, can you give a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sorry, I had to find the mute button. Can I just double check the motion? So it was to remove the COVID-19 signage at the trailheads by June 15th?
Yes, and the one-way sign, any related signage.
Okay, so motion Davies, second by Klompus to remove the COVID-19 signage at trailheads and one-way signs by June 15th. We'll start with Councilmember Grover,
Aye.
Klompus,
Yes.
Davies,
Aye.
and Ladwig.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much for that, Gabe, and for the discussion. We are now on our second reading, item number 4, second reading of ordinance 2021-02, amending Trinidad Municipal Code to restrict overnight parking in public parking lots. This is page, looks like 77 of 82 in our packet. Eli, do you want to introduce this topic, please?
Sure. So this is a discussion decision regarding the second reading of ordinance 2021-02, amending Trinidad Municipal Code 10.08.010 to allow restriction of parking in public parking lots. So in the municipal code, it does read prohibited parking. And when authorized signs are in place giving notice thereof, no person shall stop, stand, or park any vehicle. And the wording in there is currently on any of the streets or alleys enumerated by resolution of the City Council. So this ordinance would add where it would say any streets, alleys, or parking lots enumerated by resolution of the City Council. The proposed ordinance also revises the 72-hour parking limit to include public parking lots. It currently just has for streets and alleys. We've had a problem, as noted in the agenda item, at the Saunders Park area, where that also serves, in addition to the park, the library and the museum. And we have had issues with overnight parking, debris, people using, or dumping their waste from their restroom waste and so on and so forth in that area. So the intent is to create signage for that parking lot and any potential future public parking lots, which we don't have many, if there are issues in the evening, is the real intent. But it does permit us to regulate it by resolution at any time. Currently, we're thinking somewhere along the lines of 10 p.m. till 5 a.m.
All right, thank you very much. Questions, comments for Eli? Richard?
Yes. Eli, what streets are being enumerated by the resolution? Has that been determined yet?
By this resolution, this is simply adding public parking lots to streets and alleys. And I'm sorry, this is an ordinance. So by this ordinance, we're changing the municipal code to allow parking lots to be included with streets and alleys. Previously, the council by resolution has acted on the parking along Edwards Street in the area that's the top of Edwards, visible to the bay before you get into the houses on the south end of Edwards. So it would be north of the houses on the, so it's between, it's like either side of Trinity Street where there are no houses on the south end of Edwards. So basically that area, the council had indicated south end of that street and then also the north end. That was by resolution. And then also by resolution Main Street. And that would be the north end of Main Street because we had in between the bulb outs some people staying overnight in their vehicles. We had, regarding that, if you want, I can get into a little further detail because we did meet with the Coastal Commission and they have concerns about the street parking in those areas. So I could get into that. Otherwise, we could just.
I think what Richard was asking was the ordinance doesn't enumerate any streets. The resolution enumerates specific streets referring back to the ordinance.
Right, right.
Does that help, Richard? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's really a two-part issue.
Right.
The ordinance is the overarching, and then the resolution says, referring to that ordinance, we're going to enumerate this street, this side, this location.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and then actually after this ordinance is adopted, at that point, we would bring it back at the next council meeting by resolution and identify the Saunders Park public parking lot.
Thank you.
At this point, do we have any public comment regarding the second reading of this ordinance to include parking lots? All right, seeing none, bringing it back to council, we need a motion regarding this agenda item.
I'll move to amend the ordinance 2021-02 as stated in the underlying portions of the amendments.
I'll second that.
First and second, Davies and Grover. Gabe, can we do a roll call, please?
Yes, so we've got a motion, Davies, a second by Clumpus.
Grover.
I'm sorry, Grover. Thank you.
And if I could intercede, we don't have our city attorney, Russ Gans, with us, but in the past, Russ Gans had suggested that the title of the ordinance be read into the motion. So if you wish, I could do it, or if you wish to read it, that would be fine.
Gabe, why don't you go ahead and read the title of ordinance 2021-02 into the discussion here.
Right, so that's referred to it as waiving the full reading of the ordinance and read by title only. So what we'll do is we'll say there's a motion by Davies and a second by Grover to adopt the second reading of ordinance 2021-02, an amendment to ordinance numbers 87-196 regarding prohibited parking, and ordinance number 2010-2 regarding 72-hour parking limit. And with that, we'll have a vote, starting with Councilmember Grover.
Mute.
Aye.
Wampus,
Aye.
Davies,
Aye.
and Ladwig.
Aye.
The second reading passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right, our final discussion item tonight is regarding the water shortage response team. Eli, if you would please introduce this item.
Okay. So at our January 26, 2021 meeting, the city council approved the water shortage contingency plan. And part of the plan included the water shortage response team. And that's made up of the following members: city manager, public works director, city engineer, city planner, city clerk / assistant city clerk, planning commission representative, and city council representative. The agenda review committee, which meets weekly, made up of the mayor, mayor pro tem, and myself, city manager, suggests that they function as the water shortage response team in the interest of providing quick, effective decisions in a timely manner. The makeup of the 3-member committee makes it more efficient in times of an emergency rather than the 7-member team concept as originally conceived in the water shortage contingency plan. So under actions, we have either change the makeup of the water shortage response team to include the agenda review committee, or keep the composition of the water shortage response team as laid out in the water shortage contingency plan. I just want to put a side note to that. At a future meeting, probably in July, we're going to also be doing a resolution that will formalize the whole water shortage response, water shortage contingency plan. So that will be coming up in the future. But this is to identify what the water shortage response team would be like, and then we don't incorporate it into that resolution coming up at our next meeting.
And I would like to add that the water shortage response team has been given I feel anyway, very clear guidelines to follow based on water flow rates on cubic feet per second, and recommended actions to take at each of the stages of water shortage as we work ourselves through the dry season. So it's already in place, at least in draft form, on what this team would be working on. So just want to make sure that was included in folks' discussion. So at this point, questions or comments from the council regarding this item? Richard?
Yes, I wasn't sure procedure-wise, if you have to pass the Trinidad water shortage, is it an ordinance which then establishes the response team? Or are we doing this in reverse? Don't you have to have the actual ordinance and plan approved, and that in itself establishes this team, rather than try to set up the team first and then pass the ordinance later when it's not completed?
Yeah, this is actually, if you, in the item, it's called discussion decision regarding makeup of the water shortage response team. So all we wanted to do is basically give direction as to the makeup of the team, so that when we bring it back in a resolution format next month, it will be clear that this is the makeup of that team as part of the resolution and the plan.
Okay, so do a follow-up question?
Mhm.
Okay, I agree with wanting to be expeditious. I agree that the water shortage ordinance has the flow rates in it, but I'm a little bit uncomfortable not having someone from Public Works who actually deals with this on a day-to-day basis and has a deeper understanding and knowledge as not being a part of the team. I think it's more than just looking at a chart and saying the flow rate's 0.8, then here's what we have to do. I think having someone from Public Works who is more of an expert on our system will be able to provide this team insights as to whether or not they need to move faster, slower, or there are issues that you haven't thought about before that could accumulate over time. So I'm all for having a smaller team, but I want to make sure we put someone with an in-depth experience with the town's water system who knows it inside and out, who can help guide this process should the formula not hold up. We're all hoping it will, but it may not. There may be issues that we haven't planned on. And having that expert, to me, or representative as a city expert, will help make a difference of making a better decision versus a quick one. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments from the council? All right, let's move it out to public input on the water shortage response team composition. Paula?
I don't want to talk about the composition. I just wanted to talk about the ordinance.
We're
That wasn't-
talking, tonight is just about the composition of the water response. I have to keep looking at my notes. The water shortage response team. That's what we're
Okay.
discussing.
Is the ordinance going to be at the next meeting next month?
I believe it will.
Okay, will the public get a chance to read what this ordinance is before the next meeting?
Absolutely. It's always in the packet 72 hours before the meeting.
The ordinance itself. Okay,
Everything
thank
that we're
you.
discussing. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Other comments from the community? Aaron.
I just wanted to say that I also have a little hesitancy not having a subject matter expert as part of the decision-making group. And with all due respect, I'm not suggesting at all that the proposed three-person group wouldn't consult with the planning or with the water department. But I think it's important that they have kind of a more of a, for lack of a better word, legitimate or role in this makeup as opposed to just one advisory. Just I think it's too critical and there's too many variables that can kind of come in with this. Thanks.
Okay. Other comments from the public? Richard Johnson, and you're on mute, sir.
Thank
There
you.
we go.
I submitted some comments earlier and hopefully you've had a chance to read them. But another comment I would make is that I think it's very important that in this very critical decision-making process that there be complete transparency of what is going on. And with the composition that you are proposing, I don't believe that the Brown Act is invoked, which means that you could be making decisions without any public input. I don't think that's fair. And as I said earlier, I think that this requires a great deal of transparency and a lot of thought process. And so I would clearly recommend that it be a public process and that you include, as Aaron pointed out, SME subject matter experts that would participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Other comments from the community? All right, at this point, seeing none, let me do a quick check to see if anyone's, nope, no one's raising their hand. Bring it back to council for recommended action or further discussion. Go ahead, David.
Yes, I agree with a lot of what's been said here too. I like that idea of public transparency a lot too. I don't know if that was actually mentioned before. I did read his comments that he sent earlier. So I think we should move forward with a similar composition to the original. I'd like to hear a more refined version of what I'm saying now by maybe another council member who's maybe put more thought into this. But I think just having that expert advice when it comes down to, like, anybody can probably read the chart, like it was said before, but then to take it, you know, saying, okay, this is the flow. Now we start this process. So everybody, the word gets out, even though everybody doesn't participate maybe as much as we'd like, the word will get out and have a lot better chance of getting out with that kind of backing and that kind of public transparency going on.
Okay. Tom or Richard, further comments?
Yeah, I'm going to take a hybrid approach. And to me, you have to have the city manager, you have to have the public works director. I don't really know at this point whether you need to have a city engineer, city planner, city clerk. Planning commission representative might be helpful, and certainly someone from the city council might be helpful. But my view of the city engineer, city planner, those folks can be brought in as needed if the team isn't able to come up with a proper response. But I can see paring it down slightly, but I would again recommend a hybrid approach. City manager, public works director, planning commission representative, and a city council representative, and a support staff of city clerk or assistant city clerk as needed. And to me, I think that's a better combination. It's not too big. You can still bring more people in, but you have the necessary folks there who understand the system and can ask the right questions and hopefully make the right decisions.
And any comment, Richard, on, because right now that's also not subject to Brown Act, is that that was a comment made by Mr. Johnson. Is this something that, for transparency's sake, that we need to have publicly noticed, and following the Brown Act rules, in your opinion?
In one estimation, it's not going to hurt anything. It doesn't have to slow up anything, but anything that you can do, from my perspective, of increasing public awareness of drought, to me is a better way to communicate, because people know what the plan is and they're able to understand it and address the issue, versus it being done in a closed room and they receive a postcard the next month that says, don't water your lawn anymore. I like this idea of having, again, Zoom meetings are easy these days, but I think it would be helpful in the communication process. That would make it that much easier for people to learn and understand exactly what's going on with our water system and its impact with the drought.
And from a procedural standpoint, we can, I believe, call 24-hour emergency meetings, and that satisfies the public notification process.
Yeah, and I kind of recommend, Mayor, that this team meets minimum once a month. It could be every 2 weeks initially to get things under control, because it's kind of like when you hit July, you got to get serious about it, about conservation and about trying to control the amount of water we use. We don't have a reservoir, so if we don't conserve what comes down the creek, we don't have it for the next day, essentially. So this team could be meeting a little bit more frequently at the beginning to get things under control.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Richard's approach, and I like that it would be a publicly noticed meeting, so people could at least hear the rationale behind what was happening, rather than just receiving the information and feeling like a decision is being shoved down their throat. If someone disagrees, they can at least voice their opinion, even if the committee disagrees with them or not. I do agree that probably it would be sufficient. Let me say this the other way. So we could probably exclude the city engineer and the city planner from this. If they're going to be meeting a few times a month, if there's an issue, it's going to save the city some money. But I'm sure Ryan has a handle on what's happening with the water system, probably better than the city engineer or the city planner. They're going to want to go back and look at plans and, take 2 hours to decide what's going to happen. And so I would like to exclude those two members, but keep
Okay.
it as is with that exception.
And then are you suggesting we add a publicly noticed component to this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, with these people, then, I mean, with Zoom, like we're saying, we wouldn't necessarily need to all come down to City Hall. I mean, we're not
Right.
meeting in person anyway, but this could maybe just be one of those, this is a virtual meeting that happens because we have a large number of people on this committee, and it might be easier to do it that way.
Okay. Other comments then from the council?
I like that list. I think the list Richard made, I don't know if he could turn that into a motion, because it seemed like the list that Councilmember Davies made as well, with just those two different people gone and that transparency component.
The publicly noticed. And do we want to just assume publicly noticed, or do we want to specify 24 hours, 72? I mean, I don't know how nimble we need to be, but and then Eli, can you just sort of weigh in on staff time for this sort of event? Just your initial feedback on staff time needed, if this is an every 2-week meeting, or if this is once or twice to get it started, and then as needed, what's realistic given staff resources right now?
Well, the severity of the drought will make it important that we raise it to a higher level. I know Gabe is on there. I question whether we would need to have the city clerk or assistant city clerk, because what I could be doing is just share with them whatever we come up with at the meeting. That would help because I know they have a lot of things already on their plate. And since I'm part of administration and they're part of administration, I think basically an administration representative, a public works representative, and then at that point, it could be a planning commission representative and a city council representative, or whatever. Could be 2 city council or whatever. So in other words, we'd want to get a couple elected or appointed officials and a couple from staff, meaning, for instance, myself and the public works director.
Okay, so you're saying that staff resources, really, as long as there's someone, either the city manager or the clerk, so not both, so we're not taxing staff unnecessarily, is what you're advocating for.
That's correct.
Okay, Tom?
Like from a procedural standpoint, so let's say this group meets, they make a decision. Does that decision need to come to the city council to be enacted?
No. Basically, the way the water shortage plan is written, it's as Richard Klumpus had indicated, it already has all the various steps. In essence, all of this could be done on a staff level. But what we're doing is getting a little bit more transparency so that people could weigh in on, should we include no watering of lawns? Should we just say, cut back on your showers? This way to get a little additional public input. But technically, it's laid out well enough that it could be just handled on a staff level, because what we want to do is to act quickly, as the levels start going down. And certainly if we continue it to a council meeting, that would really slow down the process.
No, I agree. That just occurred to me.
You switched over to mute, Tom.
Sorry, I thought I was off again. Yeah, I'm just basing my thought on the other advisory groups. So this is technically not an advisory committee. It's a committee that can actually stand alone and make decisions. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and it really, the committee is really just fine tuning the efforts of the drought contingency plan. So luckily the parameters are already set. It's the fine tuning, I think, that this committee will be asked to do. So I'm hearing
And
now
just-
a fairly
just to,
complicated, go ahead, Eli.
Yeah, I just want to, let's continue to use the word team to distinguish it from a committee. So that this way it's clear that we're creating a body that can act and carry out the plan.
Good.
Point.
So anybody ready to take a stab at a motion, or Richard, did you have a question?
No, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay,
So
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that the water shortage response team consists of the city manager, public works director, a planning commission representative, and a city council representative, which will employ public meetings for decision making.
right, publicly noticed meetings, okay.
Second that.
Any further discussion? All right, let's, Gabe, if we could pull out one more vote, that would be fantastic.
Sure, let me clarify real quick before we move forward, because I'm probably gonna be the one doing the public notices. Public notices are very specifically described in the Brown Act on how they are to be done. Do we have a procedure? Are we gonna follow the Brown Act for public notices? Or are we gonna do these meetings by Zoom? Or did I miss that part of the conversation? I just want to make sure, because if this is a hybrid situation, I want to get it right. Can anybody answer that for me?
I think Zoom
I
is,
might be able to.
go ahead, David.
Yeah, I believe that because it's an emergency situation, when we change our water allocation, that it's always in 24 hours, preferably, unless there was some other variable that was gonna have to postpone it. But I think any time that we're gonna make a move like that, it should be done, the public should know within the day, that we're going to be doing that. But that's,
And-
you
and
can
if
look,
I
I
can
would
add-
want that confirmed with our lawyer, to make sure that there's no section number that I'm missing or something.
Yeah, and if I can add, Gabe, I think we should just have it as a live meeting. Getting into Zoom and all of that would just be too cumbersome. We want something, most of us are vaccinated anyway, and we can always practice social distance, and it's only a group of 4. So, and if someone comes from the public, that's fine. But we just want to have it where we can act quickly and minimize all of the red tape, so to speak.
Okay, I understand that, but if we don't publicly message, if we don't publicly announce a meeting in accordance with the Brown Act, there's clear procedures that you can point to say, hey, I missed that meeting, or I didn't get that notice and it wasn't noticed in advance. Are we talking about just like the same paper format that we do for all of our other meetings? Water shortage response team will be meeting on such and such day and time, and then we send it out on the electronic notification process, or put it on the calendar of our agendas. I don't want to get too complicated here, but I also don't want to miss something and then be accused of, shortchanging the public.
Yeah, it would be the Brown Act protocol, meaning that, if time allows, we'll do a 72-hour notice. And if not, it will be a 24-hour notice. But yeah, the notice will be by Brown Act.
So we're going to Brown Act adopt a procedure for a non-Brown Act required group. I'm just making that clear. Okay.
I have a comment
Yeah,
to
Tom's
make.
got a question or comment.
It's potentially that this group may have to meet very soon. And we don't have a protocol for public meetings in person. So I think it needs to be right now virtual meeting. We can't just say because 4 of us are vaccinated and if a member of the public comes, they can stand in the doorway. I don't think that's appropriate. So I think we need to move forward with the procedures that we've been moving forward with. The public is familiar with this by now. It's been over a year. I don't, putting up a Zoom link is not, it doesn't seem that cumbersome. It's something that you just post on the
Yep.
site.
Gabe, is that
No,
make sense?
I got it. We're just gonna pretend that it's a committee, and we're gonna follow the same procedures for that.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
all
yep.
right, got it. Okay, so.
Richard?
No, I prefer Zoom. I want as many people to connect in as they can and feel safe doing it. So I wouldn't change the protocol of what we're doing already.
I do too, because we already have a transition period that's gonna happen when things do become live. A lot of people have adapted to Zoom, so we want to take that into account too. Not everybody's gonna be like, okay, it's like, so let's keep it going.
Okay, and then, so since Gabe is the city clerk, and as Gabe was noting, he needs to notice and do all of that, whatever he feels might be helpful.
Yeah, no,
Can you hear me okay? I see a note saying I'm on mute.
Richard Klumpus, no one's on mute.
Oh, okay. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that since Gabe is the city clerk, you're gonna be doing this. What do you think would be the best approach?
Well, consistency is the best. So whatever's, I want to be as consistent as possible. So that would mean that, I'm not gonna expect to get at 9 a.m. say, hey, call a meeting for today at noon. We're gonna follow the Brown Act, and we're gonna say that the meeting can't happen until tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you're telling me at 9 a.m. in the morning. So I don't want to make hybrid rules for something.
No.
And shortchanging the public is not in anyone's interest. And having to set up a new set of rules sounds a little complicated. So we're just going to pretend without consequence that we're going to follow the Brown Act, because not that we're a Brown Act. This is a Brown Act committee,
Yep.
basically, even though it's not, and I'll make that noted for the record, and everything will be posted the same way, minus an administrative staff person to take minutes and then approve minutes at a later date. This is just a functioning sort of a technical, quick action committee.
I expect that this will be in the staff report of council meetings for those who didn't get notification otherwise.
Got it.
In terms of reporting out.
Okay.
And the great thing about the Zoom is we have this on record. So if someone wants to challenge something that's been made, or we need to have minutes,
Yep.
it's recorded, it's accessible.
Got it. And for the time being anyway, while we're still using Zoom. So this makes sense to me, and I am prepared to restate the motion made by Councilmember Klompus, seconded by Grover, to let's see. So the water shortage response team will consist of the city manager, the public works director, the planning commissioner, and a planning commission representative and city council representative, and that they employ the public meetings process for the decision-making. And with that, we'll start with Councilmember Grover for a vote.
Yes,
Klompus,
yes,
Yes,
Davies,
Aye.
and Ladwig.
Aye,
Motion passes unanimously.
very good. Thank you for that discussion and for that input from the community. And we will be nimble with this as Richard showed us in his council report that our creek is already in need of attention. So we will be convening this group shortly. And maybe when it comes time, when we read this ordinance, then we can select council member and planning commission member. So we'll do that at a future meeting. And at this point, I believe that we want to discuss our second June meeting. June 22nd, I believe, is the last. It's two Tuesdays from now, which would be the other regularly scheduled meeting. Does that work for the council's schedule? Yes, Richard?
I'll be on flights all day until 11:30 at night. I'm visiting my mom who's 98 in Pennsylvania. Haven't seen her in a year, so she's hanging in there, and I hope to see her. So I'll be flying all day long. But again, if there's a day before, after, or if I miss a meeting, it's understandable.
If I could point out, the intent, I believe, will be to simply have this meeting based on the budget. So it would not be like a council meeting with all of the other agenda items. Will just be on the budget. There'll be a special meeting for the budget. So therefore, I think we don't necessarily have to have it on the 22nd. So we could have it on the 21st, which is a Monday, or we could have it on the 23rd, which is a Wednesday.
Richard, either one of those days make more sense for you?
It might be easier to have it the day before, but whatever's more convenient for others. I'll make it work either way.
Well, if you're going back east, I'm going to recommend it on the 21st. You don't want to be meeting at 3 in the morning or whatever it is. So
Right, after flying around and then come back and have a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, let's, Monday.
Tom and Dave, does that work for
Yes.
your schedules to have it on June 21st?
Theoretically, in theory, yes, on the 21st, unless something else
Oh,
happens to me.
right, because I have that General Assembly too. I'm going to, but I think that's during the day, but I'll figure it out.
Okay, so we're tentatively then penciling in June 21st in the evening for a budget meeting. And you know, I'm not gonna jump the gun here or anything, but we've already done the heavy lifting on the budget, but we do need to all mull it over for the time between now and then, and any other information that comes in will definitely fill in the gaps. So it's an important meeting. And if we can get all 5 of us, I think that's very beneficial. So we're penciling it in for Monday, the 21st of June for our next meeting.
Perfect.
What about future agenda items for our July meeting? Any agenda items that have not already been discussed? Go ahead, Richard.
I'd love to finish up the G to G framework.
We were close. We were inches away. We're waiting for a little bit more feedback. So we will that's gonna be on the next meeting as soon as we get that feedback from all the entities.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other agenda items that folks want us to make sure we include? Paula?
I think there should be a monthly update on what the Water Advisory Committee accomplishes.
Absolutely. That will be in the staff report because that's run by our city manager as far as coordination of that effort. That will end up in our staff report. We are going to talk about water for sure all the way through November, just because this year. So
Okay,
thank you for that input.
thank you.
Other ideas for pressing agenda items that we need to consider right now? And if not, of course, we can always hear about them later as you come up with them.
Maybe later.
Okay, with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for your input this evening, folks. And we'll see you out there on the streets.
See you guys, everyone.
Bye-bye.